Thank you, Tom, for this optimistic insight on the future. I would kindly ask you to remain on stage as we are starting now our panel discussion. And I would like to welcome back on stage Aleksander Smigielski from Boehringer Ingelheim and Jorn Lyseggen from Meltwater to join the discussion. And also please welcome a transformation leader and head of social and digital business design global of the outstanding marketing and technology agency DigitasLBi, John Monks.
Should we sit down in one movement and sit? It's as if we rehearsed together. Yoga, exactly. So if we're starting the panel now, I'm just going to roll in until someone runs onto stage and knocks me over. I'm not going to talk very much because I have done at length, and I'm sure you're all tired of my voice. But first of all, I wanted to thank Alex and John and Jorn for joining us on stage now. John is newly with us, and just to reiterate, he's from DigitasLBi, and as I read from my notes, is the global head of digital business design. So someone that's very, very close to, as my other colleagues are, to the ways in which technology can drive competitive advantage for business. Now, I don't know how this format's going to work, but I thought I'd just start out by asking you, Jorn, at the end, if we think just for a second, I mean, it's obvious that technology has made much of what your business is possible. Yeah. But what do you think is if you like, the biggest advantage that technology provides your clients today?
Yeah, I think technology is very instrumental in actually understanding the world around us. So, I mean, it's just too much data to manually sift through all that information. So, it's just an absolute necessity. So, just taking on all that data, you need technology. I will start there.
Absolutely. And Alex, when you talked about technology applications, certainly in media and getting access to customers, but also you ended on a very sort of high-level philosophical note about the role for technology in improving lives. From a healthcare point of view, what's your view on how technology is giving you an advantage now?
I'll check if this works.
Yes,
thanks. It has an exponential role. Technology is embedded in our business because our business is about innovation and helping people live healthier lives. However, what I discovered arriving here yesterday is that technology is going to change our lives in unexpected ways. And it's the lives of us here, not about the lives, it's not lives of the companies. You mentioned refrigeration. I mean, refrigerator happens to be my favorite thing at home for obvious reasons. And my refrigerator very soon is going to start talking to other things at home. I'm very happy for her. I want her to be happy. But when she does, then should I, as a media director, should I continue advertising to female purchasers, female shoppers? I think not. I should start talking to refrigerators. And that's a fundamental change of how my job is going to look like. And as we all heard, it's just around the corner.
Absolutely. Do you have a name for your fridge, or is it just she?
I'll tell you over at
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later. Anybody who does have a name for their fridge, please feel free to tweet it now. John, moving on from refrigeration, I mean, your work is very much about helping organizations think about the role for digital in changing business. Can you think of an example, maybe from your own work, of an unexpected benefit, say, that technology has brought for advantage?
You know, I think it's a fascinating question, and it's great the way that you framed it in terms of the competitive advantage. And I actually just wanted to kind of loop back to some of the examples you gave in your great presentation about the new businesses that are out there, like Airbnb and organizations that are providing new services. And I think that's a fascinating story, because you also talked about Skype, which is now like an old business. It's been there a long time. And you look at a company like Airbnb, which now has more hotel rooms than any hotel chain on the planet. So that's an enormous number of rooms. And at one sense, you're saying, okay, that's created a great new service. It's something new that we didn't have before. So that, that's great. It's entered into a category. But one thing that it's done, which I think is absolutely fascinating, is it's what's that done to the Hilton Group where I was staying last night? So that has taken away competitive advantage from a very established player. And what was going through my mind when you were talking about it was thinking back to when Skype was new. And there was lots and lots of discussion about how, the regulated industries like telcos, it was kind of a very high barrier to entry, and regulation would mean that people wouldn't get in. And so it was fine. These little startups like Skype, they'd be fine, but they wouldn't really eat into Deutsche Telekom or France Telecom or BT or AT&T. And to a certain extent, that was true for a little while, but what happened quite quickly was they basically just started to take away the premium services. So what really eventually happened was the competitive advantage was eaten into, and that happened without those big organizations seeing it coming, really. And I see the same thing, you look at Uber and Lyft, other ones like that, exactly the same thing happening, taxi firms saying it's fine, regulation will protect us, but the reality is it's eating into their competitive advantage, and it will have an impact on their business.
That's interesting. And that touches on something that Jorn, you were talking about. I mean, I guess you were setting out a case for the change to the boardroom, and for data analytics to be in a screen like HAL at the end of the board table. Are you seeing that very much to John's point, that there's an acceptance of that need for external information, or is there still resistance in the boardroom, do you think?
I think definitely there's an increasing acceptance, but I think a lot of decision makers as well as people in the board don't really know how to get their arms around all that information.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about the question with respect to technology. I think one thing that is pretty clear is that the development and the impact of technology in the next couple of decades will just accelerate compared to what we experienced so far.
Yeah.
Which is staggering when you think about, we are probably the first generation that grows up with computers. So computers were not commonplace when I grew up, but all the kids that grow up now, computers are commonplace. But because of technology over the last few decades, in a dramatic way, has transformed all industries. And if you think about the small time window that has really elapsed, and how much technology changed the world, it's definitely reason to believe that in the next couple of decades, the changes that we will see will be even more larger than what we have seen so far.
That's fascinating. And Alex, I mean, just thinking about that, looking ahead to the future, from, say, a healthcare point of view, I mean, you talked about the very vivid image of somebody on the toilet worrying about bowel-related disorders, but presumably there's also significant ways in which technology can help to improve people's lives from a healthcare perspective. Are you optimistic about the future, as Jorn is saying, and the exponential power that it might have to help your customers' lives?
Absolutely. As I mentioned, last week we were in Istanbul on a global conference, and Boehringer Ingelheim is a privately owned company, and Christian Boehringer, who owns the company, came, and he spent one day with us. And our business is the bigger business is on the prescription medicine side, so we don't advertise it. It's not OTC, but he said that he believes technology would allow our company to get better access to to give patients better access to healthcare, because in every developed country there is a state that regulates this access, and they are not very fast in adapting. Especially that a hospital can keep your medical records and can tie you to their services because you can never move because it's too difficult. And especially when you launch a new medicine that you spend billions of dollars to develop, you want patients to have choice and be able to choose where they go and what their treatment is, and how would they know? Of course, the doctors must tell them, but is there any technological barrier for them to understand what's the best way to treat and to choose where to go? I think not. And this is a big hope for pharma to be on a very competitive ground, but competing innovation-wise, not state decision-wise.
Really
so
interesting.
It's a big hope.
And John, on that note, you work advising organizations about change through technology. Are you finding that your client organizations are pushing at the boundaries of what's allowed by government? And do they talk to you about a tension in trying to meet demand ahead of what regulators say make possible? Is that a big issue for them?
It's a big conversation. I would say that actually, I don't know about your company, and I work with a number of pharma companies, but it's certainly not pushing against the boundaries of regulation. It's quite a cautious industry. It's quite conservative. So I think there's a desire to get out there and kind of push against it, but there's a lot of internal inertia and there's a lot of cultural barrier in big corporate organizations like that. And I think one of the things, healthcare is just such a fascinating industry, and of course, you've got the Apple Watch, but you also had Fitbits and other things. And one of the themes that I see in healthcare is this trend of expanding from the product into the kind of the healthcare delivered, both from the point of view of those big organizations funding healthcare, so the National Health Services or the insurers in the US, and also from the consumers as well. So what you're having to do is say, okay, you've got a brilliant product, you've got something which is fantastic. You used to be able to sell this in a certain way, probably through doctors, but the reality now is that what you need to be able to do is wrap around that a service that might include access to new technology, it might include kind of data mining, it could have all of these things wrapped into it, but the end result is it's giving a very, very different, much better experience of that brand in healthcare. And I think also, but where actually some products are very niche, others are not at all, they're very generic. So, if you do have the ability to wrap a service around a generic product, you can massively increase the value of that. And that's something I think that most pharma is desperate to do because they need to squeeze value out. And just, I think culture is super important, and the ability to think of things like what a service design is in a product company. And you gave the great example of, the changing boardroom, and one of the presenters, I forget who now, was talking about, having data nerds, these data nerds, and largely these are in the marketing department, and we certainly have them, and I've seen lots of companies that have them. But I haven't yet seen one in the boardroom. I haven't yet seen a CMO who's a data nerd, and that I think is quite a contrast to those data nerds in financial services, like they're at the board table, like those ones who are super good at data analytics for the purposes of trading.
Chief scientist. Yeah.
Absolutely, I see that coming. I just think it's not quite there yet.
And on that note, Jorn, you're I say it's fair to call you a serial entrepreneur, or at least you describe yourself as such. I mean, if 15 years ago the opportunity through technology was to liberalize our access to business information from the outside, it's a bit of an unfair question, but if you were going to put your money in something now, where do you think the biggest opportunity for technology transforming something that's otherwise stuck in the 20th century, where would you put your money next?
I would say it was a very unfair question.
Sorry, don't reveal any confidential information.
Right, no. I think, I'm pouring my heart into the space I just talked about in my presentation, so clearly that's an area I believe in. But I think there's one fundamental big question that has still not been solved. And that is related to online authentication. So you have Google that created a search engine for finding all the information. Digital becomes a part of what we do constantly 24/7. But it is shocking to think how naive we are when it comes to online authentication. I can send a text message to all of you guys, and it can look like it come from, maybe from your phone, right? I can send an email to all of you, and everyone will assume, the sender of that email or that text message is as it looks like. So in many ways, we have embraced technology and we become very active digital citizens, but we are extremely naive when it comes to authentication. And fundamentally, every day you are in so many situations where you need to know who is the person on the other end of the line. Is that person really who he or she claims? And I think that is a massively important problem. And if you solve it well, it's going to be a multi-billion-dollar business.
Fantastic,
so maybe more from a wish list than what I would want to pursue, because I think it's a hard problem to solve.
Well, I personally am worried about my fridge calling me when I'm at work and telling me I've run out of milk, but I'm hoping that's not going to be an issue. I'm just going to do a time check. Can somebody wave their arms to let me know how we're doing? I know we're running over a little. Nobody's waving their arms. Do the audience want to wave their arms at all? Wonderful, thanks very much. Well, I'll keep going until somebody snipers me. So, just Alex, thinking about that idea of knowing who someone is. I mean, what the issue of data around medical information is perhaps one of the hottest topics around, isn't it? Particularly as healthcare changes in the US and elsewhere. Is it a big issue for your organization, and how, do you see the potential there to do more and to change things?
We are very Catholic about the rules and regulations, and we are very, very careful. So we just hope that the technology would enable improvement, and that the key stakeholders would notice it and appreciate it, and then this way it would change, not by pushing anything. And of course, data and confidentiality is of paramount importance. So we get trained very often, and we have to obey certain rules, and we really need to comply. On the other hand, to the point from your presentation, I mean, at the end, we should be the ultimate holder of our personal information and decide to whom we disclose it and for what purposes. Not that someone is collecting it and manipulating it, and we don't know what's happening with the data. So it's a great hope. However, it's still unresolved, and it's not on your list of items that are going to be resolved by 2050. So quite worried.
We can add some more in. Yes, I'm seeing a hand. So I think that takes us to the end of our time.
2 more minutes.
Is there time? No, there is 2 more minutes. That's a 2-minute warning.
In 3 seconds.
Can I just quickly pick up on that point?
John, I'd love that.
Because I think that is fantastic, and I do. My answer to the same question you posed would be it's healthcare. Like, it's in healthcare. I mean, it's got such a huge impact on people's lives, and the tech is not quite there yet. And there's huge money in the industry supporting it. And I think it's really interesting what you're saying there, because there's the idea of personal data, which is obviously kind of life and death for the pharma industry, for the medical industry as a whole. And there's there are big restrictions around it, but there are ways to work with that. And two that immediately come to mind. First is, we've probably got a room full of fantastic entrepreneurs and startups in here who may be able to do all kinds of stuff that your organization absolutely couldn't. So there's a thread, I think, of just finding great partners, kind of creating a community in which you can start to kind of seed ideas, and at the right moment in time it may be possible to kind of form something formal, but you can get something which is a lot more nimble than a big pharma company. And then the other trend, I think, is, in healthcare as a broad category, everyone is terrified about this personal data thing. And in most countries there are very, very strict regulations of what can and cannot be done. However, as you say, at the end of the day, the data is actually owned by the individual. And if you look at what individuals are willing to just give away, just put out there on Facebook, it's enormous, absolutely enormous. So I think there's probably a case where at some point in the future where the value that the consumer or the person will get is brilliant, that actually you'll just find that the regulation is outdated. Yeah. It just doesn't matter anymore, at which point it'll have to be retrospectively updated. That's my prediction.
So regulation catches up, in effect, with what people are really doing and expecting. So I have time, I think 20 seconds, just to take some time to thank you all very much. John, for joining us, and I know you'll be presenting this afternoon, but also to Alex and Jorn for fantastic presentations. And thank you all for your attention, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for this nice discussion, and now we are ready to go for lunch break for 40 minutes, expecting you back here at 12:50.